The bow on the hood caught the sunlight. They were clapping, cheering, hugging him. In my hands, a plain white envelope. Heavy, sharp, and colder than the June air. My name's David. I'm 46 years old. And this is the truth. Father's Day had always been an awkward ritual in my wife's family. Her dad, Robert, wasn't a bad man on paper. Retired from the postal service. Still mowed his own lawn, still called his daughter Pumpkin like she was 8 years old. But behind the smiling holiday photos there was a quiet imbalance that no one ever seemed to notice except me. It was always about him. The stories, the praise, the seats at the table. All revolving around Robert like planets around a sun that had long since burned out but still demanded light. That morning I'd been told we were going to a little brunch at their place. My wife, Melissa, had brushed me off when I asked if we should bring anything. "Just yourself," she'd said, her tone distracted, eyes glued to her phone. She'd been on it a lot lately, not in a cheating kind of way, at least I didn't think so, but in that cagey, half-present way people get when they're hiding the shape of something. The smell of bacon hit me the moment we walked through their door. The kind of thick, greasy scent that clung to your clothes for hours. Robert was at the head of the table, coffee cup in hand, looking like a king, waiting for his court to assemble. We ate, we laughed, or rather they laughed. I sat there working at my eggs, feeling the same low hum of being an outsider in a room full of insiders. It wasn't new. I'd stopped trying to impress them years ago. After brunch, Melissa said, "Come outside, David. They're doing gifts." She was almost giddy, like a kid about to show off a surprise. We stepped into the driveway, and there it was. A brand new SUV, midnight blue, chrome trim. The works. A giant bow on top like a scene out of a holiday commercial. Robert beamed, putting his arm around Melissa. "You didn't have to," he said, but the tone was pure performance. Of course they had to. In this family, grand gestures were currency, and Melissa always paid in full. Then she turned to me. "Here," she said, handing me a plain white envelope. No bow. No flourish. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, my name in the header. Below it, a payment schedule. A mortgage payment schedule. Not for our house. For theirs. The word swam for a second before settling into focus. 30 years. My income. My signature forged in a neat, careful hand that looked almost like mine but wasn't. I looked up. She was smiling like she'd just given me a puppy. Robert was already running his hands along the SUV's hood. Everyone else was watching, waiting for my reaction. I felt the air go thin. The sun seemed to dim, even though I knew it hadn't. "Congratulations," Melissa said. "We're helping them pay off the house. It's security for the family." Security. That was the word she chose. Like she was doing me a favor. Like tying me to 30 years of debt for her parents was some kind of noble act. I didn't speak. I couldn't. There's a certain kind of anger that doesn't explode, it condenses. Pulls in tight, sharp as a knife. Cold as dry ice. I folded the paper back into the envelope. Slid it into my jacket pocket. And while they posed for photos with the car, I walked down the driveway. Past the mailbox. Past the hedges. Out of sight. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Melissa. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer. I just kept walking. The first step in revenge isn't always a plan. Sometimes it's silence. Silence that makes the other person think they've won. Silence that buys you the time to watch and remember. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to a motel 2 towns over, paid cash, sat on the bed staring at that envelope on the nightstand. I ran my thumb over the forged signature again and again. If I pressed my nail into the paper just right, the indent of the pen lines caught in the light. Whoever did it had taken their time. Practice. Melissa. It had to be her. The sick thing was she didn't need to hide it. She could have just told me. But then telling me would have meant giving me a choice. And this wasn't about choice. This was about control. That night I thought about every time Robert had joked about how lucky I was to marry into their family. Every time Melissa had forgotten to loop me in on decisions that affected both of us. Every holiday where I'd been the extra, the satellite, the audience. And I realized something. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a challenge. 2 days later I called a lawyer I knew from years back. Not a flashy one. A quiet one. The kind that didn't advertise, didn't play golf with Jews, but knew how to file paperwork that could ruin a person without them even seeing it coming. I sent him a scan of the mortgage document. An hour later he called me back. "That's not your signature," he said. "And if it is, you were under duress." Not my signature, I said. Good. Then we start with fraud. And if you're willing to play the long game. His voice trailed off in a way I'd heard before. That tone meant the gears were turning. I told him I was willing. It would take months, maybe years, but they didn't know that by putting my name on that paper they'd given me something. A threat, and I knew exactly how to pull it, until the whole thing unraveled. I didn't answer Melissa's calls for 3 days. Not once. I let them pile up in my voicemail like unopened bills, each one a little more frantic than the last. On the 4th day I sent her a single text. Busy with work. That was all. No love you, no emoji, no opening for conversation. The kind of short, clipped line that plants questions in someone's mind. Questions that make them restless. The truth was, I wasn't busy with work. I was busy building my first wall. Not a plan yet, just distance. At the motel I had a small ritual. Mornings I'd drink burnt coffee from the lobby pot, eat toast so dry it could have been insulation, and spread out my notes on the little round table by the window. The table wobbled, so I kept a folded napkin under one leg. It became my war desk. First I listed everything Melissa had in her name alone. Bank accounts, credit cards, the car she drove. She'd been smart about some of it, but lazy about others. She'd used my email for a store rewards program, and that was enough to trace purchase histories. Second, I listed every connection between her and Robert, joint accounts, shared insurance policies, anything that tied them financially. By the end of the first week my list was ugly. They weren't just close, they were entangled. And the mortgage? That was the final knot pulled tight around my neck. The lawyer, Pete, was methodical. We're not rushing this, he told me over the phone. His voice was steady, measured. You want to win? You let them think you're not fighting. That became the core of my approach. Appear passive. Move quietly. Make them comfortable. Pete started with a handwriting analysis. The results came back in my favor. High probability of forgery. It wasn't admissible in court yet, but it was enough for leverage. Then he had me request a full copy of the mortgage documents from the bank, under the guise of personal records. That's when we found the second signature page. This one wasn't even close to my handwriting. They hadn't even tried to mimic it. Sloppy. Overconfident. On the 10th day, I went home. Melissa's eyes lit up when she saw me in the doorway. Relief, like she thought the worst was over. David, she breathed, stepping forward to hug me. I let her. I even put my arms around her. But my hands didn't move. They just rested there, limp. I needed space, I said. She nodded, biting her lip like she was holding back an argument. At dinner she slid the conversation toward the mortgage, as if it were some minor hiccup. It's going to be good for all of us, you know. Dad can relax, we'll have a stake in the property. And I didn't agree to it, I said. Calm. No raised voice. She froze for a second. You're part of this family, she said. Sometimes we make sacrifices. The way she said we was the same way a con artist says, trust me. I didn't push. I didn't argue. I just nodded like her words had sunk in. That was the key. Never let them see you load the gun. Weeks passed. Outwardly I played the part of the reconciled husband. Inwardly I was digging trenches. Pete had me quietly move certain funds into a separate account, one Melissa couldn't touch. I also stopped paying into our joint credit cards. Instead I let her spending accumulate. The more debt she racked up, the more leverage I'd have later. I also started visiting Robert. Not often, just enough to make it seem like I was Mendez. We'd sit in his garage while he tinkered with tools he never actually used. I'd ask about the SUV, listen to his little boasts about the good deal Melissa had found. All the while I was noting details, registration dates, financing terms. Even the insurance policy number stuck to the glove box. I wasn't just after the mortgage anymore. I was after every piece of ground they stood on. The turning point came when I got a call from a loan officer at the bank. He sounded hesitant, almost embarrassed. Mr. Harper, he said, I'm calling to confirm you'll be covering the upcoming balloon payment on the mortgage. It's substantial. My stomach tightened. Balloon payment? Yes, sir. The agreement includes a one-time accelerated payment after 6 months. Your wife assured us you'd been informed. 6 months. That's all it would take to sink me if I did nothing. And Melissa knew it. That night, lying next to her, I stared at the ceiling in the dark. I could hear her breathing, slow even, like she was truly asleep. If she had rolled over right then and asked me what I was thinking, I probably would have lied. But in my head, I was already moving the pieces. Step 1. Isolate the mortgage from my name before the balloon payment hit. Step 2. Shift every legal and financial liability onto Melissa. Step 3. Make Robert watch her lose it all without me ever raising my voice. I knew it wouldn't be quick. It had to look like their own doing, and that's the part most people never understand about revenge. It's not about the explosion. It's about the slow leak. Pete called me on a Wednesday morning. I was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, the smell sharp and bitter in the air. "We've got an opening," he said. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. That's how I knew it was important. The mortgage was filed under a joint liability clause. He continued. But the bank didn't verify both signatures in person. That's procedural negligence. We can petition to have your name removed, but it has to be quiet. If Melissa catches wind, she can file a spousal asset claim before we move. I leaned against the counter, staring at the slow drip of coffee filling my mug. "Quiet works," I said. "Good. We'll need a reason on record for you to be distancing yourself financially. Something believable. Something she can't argue with." That was the moment the first domino tipped in my head. I started working longer hours. Not actually at the office. Pete had told me to keep all sensitive moves off company networks but out of the house. I'd leave before sunrise, come back after dinner. Melissa complained at first, but I let her think it was temporary. Just until this quarter's over. In reality, I was at the bank, moving our accounts piece by piece. The joint savings, split. The joint checking, frozen. Fraud investigation. Thanks to Pete's discreet connections. Her credit cards, still open, but I quietly stopped making the automatic payments. I didn't tell her. I didn't have to. Debt has a way of introducing itself. One Friday evening I came home to find her pacing the kitchen. "They froze our checking account," she said. "Do you know anything about that?" I shrugged, hanging my jacket. "Probably just a glitch. You know how banks are." She gave me that sharp, narrow-eyed look she used when she thought she could read me. But she didn't push. That was good. It meant she was trying to believe me. The more she believed I was passive, the easier it would be when the ground gave out beneath her feet. Meanwhile, Robert was still riding high on his Father's Day prize. I stopped by on weekends, always with some small excuse. A tool I'd forgotten in his garage. A favor Melissa had asked me to do. One Saturday I brought coffee and sat with him while he admired the SUV's dashboard like it was a newborn baby. "She did good, didn't she?" he said, grinning. "She did," I said, smiling back. "Hope she didn't have to twist too many arms for the deal." He laughed. "She can be persuasive." That laugh stuck in my head, because it wasn't just pride. There was a smugness in it, the kind you hear from someone who thinks they've outplayed you. I let him have it. Let him feel untouchable. Because the higher he climbed, the harder the fall would be. By month 2, the late notices on Melissa's credit card were starting to arrive. She'd tossed them in the drawer like junk mail, muttering about clerical errors. One night she finally asked, "David, are you sure everything's fine with the bank?" I looked up from my laptop, met her eyes and said, "If it wasn't, I'd tell you." That was technically true. I just didn't tell her when. The mortgage separation process moved forward. Pete filed a signature authenticity dispute, citing the bank's failure to verify us. That triggered a review period. During the review, no payments could be collected from me. But here's the beauty. Melissa didn't know. She thought I was still liable, which meant she thought she could still use it against me. Pete smiled when I told him, "Let her think it. The longer she believes you're stuck, the less she'll see the walls going up around her." The first crack appeared in her voice 2 weeks later. We were in the living room, the TV murmuring in the background, when she said Dad's insurance premium went up. "He might need help with that too." I didn't even look away from the screen. "We can't right now. Too much tied up in the mortgage." Silence. Then the faint scrape of her nails on the armrest. That sound told me everything. She was starting to feel the squeeze. I kept the pressure subtle. Pulled back on shared expenses. Let small inconveniences pile up. A bill forgotten here. A payment delayed there. The goal wasn't to sink her instantly. It was to make her tread water until she was exhausted and then pull the shore away. 3 months in, Pete called again. "It's time," he said. "We can finalize the removal. After that, any liability falls solely on her. And Robert, of course." I pictured the look on Robert's face when he realized his house was anchored to Melissa alone. No safety net. No backup plan. "Do it," I said. Pete hesitated. "You sure you don't want to tip her off? Give her a chance to—" "No," I cut in. This isn't about fairness. This is about balance. The papers were signed in a quiet office with beige walls and a humming fluorescent light. By the time I walked out, my name was gone from the mortgage. Gone from the balloon payment. Gone from their safety. Melissa still didn't know. Robert didn't have a clue. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Because now I could decide when they found out. It started with the SUV. One crisp October morning, Robert called me. His voice was tight, a little too fast. "David, do you know anything about repossession notices?" I let a beat of silence stretch. Repossession? For what? "The car," he said like the word itself was an accusation. "They said the financing payments are overdue." I made a low, sympathetic sound. "That's strange. Melissa's been handling that, right?" He hesitated. "She told me you were making the payments." I smiled into the receiver, a smile he couldn't see. "I'm not on that financing agreement, Robert. Must be a misunderstanding." It wasn't a misunderstanding. The bank had already sent 2 certified letters, both ignored. I knew because I'd seen them tucked under a stack of junk mail on Melissa's desk. She'd been hoping to figure it out before Robert noticed. Now it was too late. That evening, Melissa cornered me in the kitchen. "What did you say to my dad?" I looked up from rinsing a glass. "Nothing." He called me. Her arms were folded, but her nails tapped against her forearm. That nervous tic had been showing up more lately. "They're going to take the car," she said. I set the glass down. Then maybe he shouldn't have bought one he couldn't afford. Her mouth opened, then shut again. The pause told me everything. She wanted to blame me, but she couldn't find a way to make it stick without admitting she'd tied herself to the payments. The cracks widened over the next month. Robert's property taxes went unpaid. Melissa's credit card statement started arriving with big red balances in the corner. The mortgage? Still quietly in her name alone. The balloon payment deadline ticking closer with every day. I didn't gloat. And I didn't even bring it up. That was the part that drove her crazy. My refusal to take the bait. Then came Thanksgiving. Robert hosted. As always, the house smelled of roast turkey, sage and something faintly burnt. Probably the rolls he'd forgotten in the oven. The family gathered. Plates piled high, conversation loud. Halfway through the meal, Robert cleared his throat. "I suppose everyone's heard by now," he said. The room quieted. "The bank says they might foreclose if we can't make the mortgage payment in December." He looked straight at me like he expected me to stand up and pledge some grand rescue. I took a slow sip of water, set the glass down gently. "That's tough," I said. "But I'm not on that mortgage." A ripple of murmurs moved through the table. Eyes darted between Robert and Melissa. She shifted in her chair, face flushing. "What do you mean you're not?" she started, but I cut her off. My voice calm and clear. "My name was removed months ago. Bank verified the signatures. Said one of them wasn't mine." I let the weight of those words hang in the air. "They fixed it." It was silent enough to hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Robert's fork clinked against his plate. Melissa's breathing was quick, shallow. Across the table, her sister whispered something to her husband. He glanced at me with a look that was half curious, half cautious. I didn't elaborate. I didn't accuse. I just went back to cutting my turkey. The beauty of public revelation is that it doesn't require theatrics. It's the absence of denial. The refusal to rescue. By dessert, the room was fractured. Conversations turned to whispers. Robert excused himself twice, claiming he needed air. Melissa barely touched her pie. When we left, she didn't speak to me in the car. The only sound was the turn signal ticking at each corner. 2 days later, the SUV was gone. Repossessed. Robert tried to frame it as downsizing, but word spread through the family fast. By the following week, Melissa's sister had called to check in on her, tone dripping with pity. Pity is a poison in that family. They thrived on appearances. Once the cracks were visible, the rest of the mask crumbled quickly. That's when I made my final move. Pete drafted a quiet transfer of my remaining joint assets into a trust, one Melissa couldn't touch without my consent. I also had him file a formal debt responsibility notice to the credit bureaus listing her as the sole liable party on multiple accounts. The result? Her credit score dropped like a stone. Robert's mortgage went into default. And me? My record stayed clean. The last time I saw Robert was in January, outside the grocery store. He was loading bags into the trunk of an old sedan. The SUV was a memory now. His shoulders looked smaller somehow. He saw me, hesitated, then gave a tight nod. No words. I nodded back and walked on. Melissa moved out in the spring, took her clothes, her jewelry, and nothing else. The house felt lighter, quieter. I never told her how I'd done it, how I'd pulled each thread until the whole thing unraveled. Some people call it justice. I call it necessary. Spring turned into summer before I heard from Melissa again. It came as a text. Short. We need to talk. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was tempted. I wasn't. But because I wondered what angle she thought she still had. People like Melissa never reach out without a plan, and plans meant she believed there was still something to take. I didn't respond. 3 days later, she showed up at my door. No call, no warning. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her eyes ringed with the kind of exhaustion you can't hide with makeup. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside, not out of kindness, just curiosity. She walked into the living room like she'd forgotten she didn't live here anymore. "I made a mistake," she said, turning to face me. "We can fix it." Her voice had that brittle edge like a pane of glass under pressure. "There's nothing to fix," I said. Her jaw tightened. "Dad's losing the house. My credit's shot. If you just..." I held up a hand. "No. You made choices. You signed my name. You put me on the hook without asking. And you did it for him, not for us." Her mouth opened, but I didn't give her the space. "I'm not your safety net. Not anymore." The quiet that followed wasn't just between us. It was in her posture, her breath, the way her eyes shifted toward the floor. She'd never stood in this house without leverage over me, and now she had none. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked. I thought about telling her the truth, that I'd been planning this since the moment I saw that bow on Robert's SUV. That I'd spent months pulling her life apart, the same way she tried to pull mine into hers. Instead, I said, "Because I can." She left without another word. I watched her walk down the driveway to a beat-up sedan with mismatched hubcaps. No bow on that one. A month later, I got a letter from Pete. Robert's house had officially been foreclosed, auction date set. I didn't attend, but I heard through the family grapevine that he'd moved into a small rental on the edge of town, the kind of place with peeling paint on the porch rails and a yard that never quite smells fresh. Melissa moved in with him. Two people who had once celebrated a brand new SUV in their driveway now sharing a house they didn't own. One Saturday in August, I passed that house on my way to the hardware store. Robert was on the porch, sitting in a faded lawn chair, staring at nothing. He saw my truck, sat up slightly, and then just watched me go by. No wave, no nod. I didn't slow down. The thing about revenge is, it's not always fire and spectacle. Sometimes it's a quiet, permanent shift. They keep living, but differently. They keep breathing, but with the knowledge they'll never be back where they were. I never told anyone in the family my side of the story. Let them think what they wanted. Gossip has a way of painting its own truth, and in this case, I didn't mind being the villain, because the people who mattered, they knew exactly what had happened, and the people who didn't matter, they could talk all they wanted. It's been over a year now. I still see Melissa sometimes at the grocery store, at the gas station, but we don't speak. She glances my way, then looks down like if she doesn't meet my eyes she can pretend I'm not there. And Robert? He's just a man now. Not the center of anything. Not the sun in anyone's orbit. I still keep the original mortgage document in a drawer in my desk. The one with the forged signature. Not as a trophy. Not as a warning. Just as proof that I wasn't imagining it. That the moment I walked away in silence, I was already winning. Some people call it justice. I call it necessary. That's it. That's the whole truth. And I'll leave you with this. If it were you, would you have walked away? Or would you have stayed and let them finish what they started?